Good morning. This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it's time for your purpose, your power, your journey to authenticity. And we share this podcast with Cleveland 13 News. And Cleveland 13 News is independent, but they're not just Cleveland. We talk about lots and lots of stories across the nation and around the world. My guest today is Jenna Udenberg. Did I say that right?
You did. Nice job.
Oh, wow. I am so impressed because I always get names wrong. Um, Jenna lives in upstate Minnesota. I used to live in Minnesota a long, long time ago. So I know what winters are like. They're cold, they're gray, they're snowy, and you think it's never going to end. And some of us love to complain on a daily basis about the weather because the weather, for some of us, determines who we are. I refuse to let that happen. I used to let it happen, but I refuse to let it happen anymore because each day is a gift. And I think Jenna has a story to share with us about how we can get through our challenges, our obstacles, and make each day the best day we can. And I love your shirt, Above and Beyond with You. So, do you want to tell us about the shirt first?
Sure. So, Above and Beyond with You is my nonprofit that I founded 3 years ago. It stands for the fact that people can go above and beyond the Americans with Disability Code. And so, a lot of times folks feel like that's the ceiling. But really, code is the floor. And so, we can do so much more to make sure people are safe, that spaces are accessible, and that our attitudinal barriers are knocked down. And the WITH stands for a nod to my 19-year career as a music educator, and most of my board members have some connection also to the education world. And so we want to go on that journey with people that we partner with. It's not just a standalone training or consultation, but really let's do life together, because that's what it's all about. And then the capital U of Above and Beyond with You is a nod to also my music career, because little 5-year-olds in kindergarten could not say, "Hey, Miss Udenberg," by the time I was already down the hall, let alone most adults, including myself some days, can't say my last name. So the kids changed my name to Miss U, which was funny because then substitute teachers always thought the kids were telling me that they missed me, but that was not the case.
Well, I think your personality shows that they probably did miss you. So, but what I find interesting, I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and a person with a disability back then, especially, was looked at as, I don't want to get too close because I may catch it, which is totally ridiculous. But we didn't know that at the time because we didn't get the training that we're getting now. But I even know, even today, that especially parents tend to pull their children away when they walk up to somebody, maybe in a wheelchair, maybe using a cane, crutches, maybe is blind, and the child will ask very, casually, "Oh, where did you get your chair? Oh, I like your cane. Oh, can I help you across the street?" And parents go, "No, no, 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 leave that person alone." But the reality of it is, if we can normalize it, doesn't it make life better for the rest of us? And I'm sorry that I grew up in that era, and it took me a long time to step away from those thoughts and feelings. So take us on your journey. What has it been like, and what is the so-called disability that you have? But I also want to hear about all your abilities.
Right. Yeah, so, I guess my comment about growing up, once we know better, then we do better. And so I think the biggest thing is that we have to continue to have grace for ourselves as we learn, right? And so there's far too much shame, right? There's too much shame that we put on ourselves. There's too much that we put on others. And so the biggest thing is just in relation to what you just said, because I just want to catch that educational moment. Here's that teacher in me, right? But just being able to figure out curious questions and finding relationships in which you can practice that has been foundationally and pivotally changing for me. Of like, let's just try to like talk the things, like let's talk about these big elephants that are in the room, or let's talk about those uncomfortable conversations that happen out in community, but let's talk about it here in this safe friend group so we can practice these things. So then when I'm out there, I maybe have a little bit less chance of inserting foot and eating my sole of my shoe because I'm kind of tired of the taste of rubber. But I do it too, right? And I live in community and I live in culture. So, yeah, so like you said in my introduction, you know, I grew up in the rural, rugged North Shore of Minnesota. I became diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis in 1988, the very beginning of it. So I was 7 years old, almost 8. I became a wheelchair user by age 8, and I don't even know the right words to use. I just am a wheelchair user. That's typically what I say. And yeah, so I categorize my elementary school years of good and bad. I grew up with great friends. I grew up with great support system in my extended family and in my immediate family, and in church family and community family, and just all those different things that make us us. I did experience bullying and discrimination from typically older students and a lot of teachers, and that was unfortunate. Younger kids, like you said in the example, right, would ask some of those questions. I remember being at an outdoor summer event and little kids came up and they're like, but you're sick. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not like an injured bird. So like you can touch me, we can play, we can talk, and you're not going to catch it. It's just, you know, arthritis just eats my joints and it's not going to make your joints eat themselves. It's just all contained in my own body. You can't catch it, you know. So very similar to the example you shared. And then when I got into junior high, I had an amazing 8th grade band teacher, and she inspired me to become a band director because she saw me for who I was. She saw my leadership skills. She saw my musical talents. And she just really supported me throughout the journey, right? And then when I advanced into high school, I had another great male teacher, and they really kind of came like my band parents. And then another male band director came in later in my career in high school. And so, you know, like at one point my family had to call in OSHA because the band room was not accessible. I ended up breaking my femurs using the accessible device to get down to the band room twice a day. Had other students learn how to pop wheelies and pull me up the risers because I was a lead trumpet player. Like, so just lots of things that in today's age would not have happened. And if they are still happening, which I think in small pockets of rural America, they probably still are, yep. Which is not okay. Liability, safety, all the things. Or they're at the point where they're like, we're sorry, you can't get there. So no, you don't get to be a part of that class. You don't get to have that experience. You don't get to ... And I did find out later in my education career, meaning like when I was a kid, that there were teachers that were like, why are we making all these accommodations? Why is the band moving to the elementary school for the first hour of the day when that disrupts my schedule that I've had for 20 years? Why are we doing it for one child? Why are we ... And so just really horrific things that I hope that are not being said today, that are not even being thought of today. And yet that friendship with my middle school band director who inspired me to become an educator, right? Not because I cared about chord progressions, not because I cared about this instrument or that, or I was going to go and create future educators. It was that all kids need an ally. All kids need somebody to stand up for them. All kids need people that are going to see them and celebrate them, even if it's the smallest thing of like, hey, you came to school today. You might not have appropriate clothes on. You might not have brushed teeth. Your hair might be a hot mess from last month, right? Like, it doesn't matter. Our job is to support kids, to support families, to be a part of community, and to raise stories up. So that was a 19-year career, and the pinnacle of my career working in 4 different schools in 3 different districts was a creation of an adaptive music program. And I had the amazing privilege of working with our speech-language pathologist and with our paraprofessionals and with case managers and The favorite story I love to tell that gives me goosebumps every time is we did what we called informances. So parents and grandparents and anybody could come into the classroom and see all the things we were working on. And the program worked where the kiddos got to come in and have music class in a smaller setting for anywhere from 1 to 2 days a week. And that class always happened before their general music class with their peers. And so they might be learning, Halloween songs day one of school, because we just needed that much extra exposure and preparing them for all the different things that were going to happen in that classroom, maybe even for only a few minutes, 1 or 2 months later on down the road. So it was a lot of advanced planning for me, a lot of, just flipping my script in my head as an educator. But the benefits and the rewards, not only seeing the disabled students, but their non-disabled peers finally having that script flipped of it's not our job as disabled people to always accommodate the non-disabled population. It is our job all together to figure out how to create community for each other. And so by bringing in visual schedules, most of my non-disabled kids in the general music class were like, Miss Yu, I want to say that this song is all done, and put it, where in the all done folder. And, but in that informant that I was speaking of earlier, grandparents and parents came in, and it was around Valentine's Day, and we were singing the song Skinamarink. And so at the end, it just goes, I love you. And so the song was all done, and one of my boys turned and looked at mom and dad and grandma and grandpa and sang, I love you. And they immediately started bawling. Well, I didn't find out until everything was done that this child had never said, let alone sang, any words, let alone I love you, to these parents. And he was 6 or 7 at that time. So the power, not just of music, but the power of just saying all the kids are my kids, and let's figure out how we bring whatever content area, whatever learning, whatever opportunities to all of my kids, and how profound that is.
One of the things that I'm understanding from what you did is that we all have different abilities, and I'm going to call them unabilities, because sometimes we can learn them and create them, such as this little boy did. Okay, my son was diagnosed at the age of 6.5 on the autism spectrum. We looked at each other and said, this can't be. I mean, he's the friendliest kid. He's active. He's advanced in all of his studies. Like, what are you talking about? And yet we saw that there were some differences in his personality. And so my husband and I had to take a step back and say, okay, we need to become educated. We need to understand. And sadly, that was in the 1990s when educators were not totally understanding of the autism spectrum. Right. But he too had a wonderful music teacher. And I sometimes think that's where a lot of this love and reinforcement comes from, is the teachers who, provide the arts, because they can bring it out of our kids. We didn't know my son could sing, had no idea. Now my mother-in-law knew, because he would sit and sing with her. Never sang with his dad. The radio would come on, and he might dance around the room, but never vocalize. No. And we got invited to school one day for a concert. And we were told most of the kids are going to be lip singing. And I figured, that's what my son's going to do. That's okay. We're going to go. We're going to enjoy it. Not only didn't he lip sing, he danced, he sang, and he put all of his energy into it. And he was on key at the age of 6.5.
Wow.
Now, my husband and I looked at each other, because we do not sing on key at all.
It skipped a generation, right?
It definitely did. But I found out that it was his music teacher who sensed this was something that he could excel in. And so he stayed in music programs all the way through high school. And each music teacher developed more and more with him. And I want to point this out very specifically now because so many schools are losing their funding for the arts.
Yeah.
And my son learned confidence through singing and performing. And now he is a young adult working in the sports industry, doing things that we were told he would never do. And it's because of someone like you, Jenna, who saw, hey, there's something here. Let's bring it out. And not all disabilities are visual. Right. You're in a wheelchair. And so, yes, somebody is going to probably come up to you and say, oh, poor Jenna, you're sick. I love your comment. I'm not sick. It's my joints. The rest of me is nice and healthy.
Right.
So you're working hard at helping other individuals. How much does that take away from self-care? Because we know self-care is extremely important.
Yeah, I am definitely not the guidebook for dummies on how to do self-care. I'll tell you that. I am a student of it every day. And even though I had this disease cycle and many others for almost 40 years now, it doesn't still mean that the type A in me, that ableist version of saying, pick yourself up by your bootstraps or you need to be superwoman, doesn't mean that those nagging, negative scripts and mindsets still aren't in the back, right? My dear friend is the president of my nonprofit. The other day I was so thankful for her. She's like, Jenna, typical people take the night off. Typical people are okay to just go and watch TV without guilt. So your permission is you just need to go and do nothing. And I appreciated that very much because sometimes we just need other people to give us permission to validate the fact that, this is where it is. But in disability culture, we also have this thing called crip spoons or crip time. And so it's just a visual way of being able to understand how much energy you have in a day. And sometimes it also is a great communication starter or a great way of other non-disabled folks or our allies or our loved ones being able to see that, right? So I can wake up in the day and I can text my president and dear friend and be like, hey, I got 4 spoons today. And it typically takes 6 just to do all of my other cares and typical schedule, right? So then she knows, got it. I will start drafting the email and making the list for Jenna, but I won't send it until XYZ, right? And so we just get to know each other's needs and strengths. And that would be my other thing of, that words have power. So the biggest thing is don't make assumptions about other people. Don't make assumptions on me because you see my chair, or don't make assumptions because you see me testing my diabetes, right? Ask a curious question of so how are you feeling today? And then don't put your interpretation or your insecurity or your negativity or your lack of vulnerability on to me, right? Oh, that's got to be so hard. Nope, I don't need that, right? Oh, poor Jenna. Nope, I don't need that. That's not helpful, right? Having empathy, yes, but all those examples I just said is not empathy. That's pity, it's grossness, it's extra work for me to cut through than just all the other work I already have just because of the life I've been given. And it's a beautiful life, and it's an important life, and it's okay to say disability. I have a disabled state of being, right? In parts of my journey, I always hated my body because it betrayed me. And in reality, it's can't really live without it. So we have to figure out how to work together. And a lot of times this disabled body and my wheels, I'm not wheelchair bound. My wheels give me freedom. And so again, it's all of that nuance of words, but the order of which we use words and giving the person who is disabled or has a medical condition, giving them agency and dignity to tell you the person that's not them, no matter what condition you might have, right? That you want to hear from them of how, what words are best to use. And so a great example for that, that I heard must be a couple years ago now from a dear friend. They said, so if I was to describe you to my friend Karen, how would you like me to describe you to her? And I felt like, wow, like so much weight had been lifted, and giving that word and that situation and that context, even to me as somebody who had been living this life for 35 years at that time, right? Like, how would I want you to describe them or to describe me, like, and then it's like, well, it comes down to context, right? Like right now in Zoom, you're not seeing my wheelchair. So does it really matter in the context of the conversation we're having? If we're talking about, this new restaurant that came up, well, unless I need accessible food, why would my disability come into it, right? So, yeah, I just really love that. Like, how would you like me to describe you to someone else?
You're talking about something that we all need in our life, whether we have a disability or not.
Or yet.
As I told you before we started, that I lost my husband 8 weeks ago. And in some ways, it's a disability because he was an extension of me.
Right.
But people do the same thing when they don't understand something. Oh, you poor thing. Well, yeah, I'm sad, and I will admit that I am, but I'm also breathing and living, and I know what he would want for me. And so the same way your chair gives you that opportunity to be part of living, my brain has told me, you got to live and you got to be. And the same way with my son being diagnosed on the spectrum in the 90s, everybody pointed at him and, oh, he's a weird kid and whatever. And the more you said that, the stranger he became, okay? Because we gave him the permission to be different. And when he finally realized, I'm no different than anybody else.
Yep.
I do things differently. I do think somewhat differently.
Right.
But we all do. And that really was right around his 19th birthday that all of a sudden I became a true advocate that we have to be vulnerable, but be honest.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I started wearing hearing aids. And at work, I covered my ears. Didn't want anybody to know. Because hearing aids, according to job applications, that's a disability. Golly. Like, I didn't feel disabled. I could participate. I could hear. And that's when I started looking at life. Wow, we don't know what somebody else is going through.
Right.
So it's time to start, and you use the word communicate. That's what you said you did when your morning's not going real well. You let your person know that, and they now know how to communicate with you. And they're not giving in. They're just making life adaptable for you at this time. And you just made them adaptable so that they don't expect something that maybe you're just not in the mood to do today.
Right. Yeah, and it's something that we can also extend back, right? So like if she's like, hey, Thursday night's date night with my husband, and then the weekend I'm gone with family. It's like, got it. Mental note. Your access need has nothing to do with your disability, but has to deal with your scheduling and your mental health and your self-care. Got it. Now I'm going to do the same thing for you. I'm going to start that email draft. And on Monday, you're not going to like me, probably. But at least I wasn't bugging you for the 2.5 days of all of your things, right? And so I think that's the thing is just like we all have needs, so let's get over it. They're going to look different. It's going to act out different. It's going to be maybe on a different time schedule, right? Like my middle-aged body and brain and hormones, let alone disability, are like, oh, you slept for 3 hours while watching TV last night. Okay, well now you're going to be up for 2 hours in the middle of the night doing X, Y, Z. And so in some ways we call that crip time because that's when our bodies and our minds finally unite and both have energy and a capability at the same time. And it's never when you want it. It's like, all right, finally fell asleep at 4:30, but the alarm's set for 6:30, which we all can relate to in some way, shape, or form in the human condition. But when it happens over and over and over because of said situation that your body or your mind have, it just is, right? And so I think that's the other thing too, is like, why do we think that hearing without hearing aids is, inherently good?
Yeah.
Whereas hearing with hearing aids is inherently bad. Traversing the world with legs that fully work and can run XYZ amount per whatever is inherently good. But wheeling that same speed using a wheelchair or a power chair is inherently bad. Like, I think we have to get out of that very extremism, black and white area. And a lot of times, again, it's unconscious bias. We don't know. Because, like you said, I was growing up in the late 80s. Well, that was before the ADA. And it wasn't like when that pen stroke happened by George Bush in July of 1990, like, oh, the world is now accessible and all accommodating. That still hasn't happened, 36 years later, almost 36 years later. But in the same respect, it's like we have the ability to change that. My biggest thing is like, do we seriously continually need federal mandates to tell us to just do what's right? Do we seriously need our states to come and write new policies, new procedures, new funding, new all the things? It's like, yeah, in some ways, yes, I do understand. We are humans. I am an educator. We need to be told that the purple crayon is a purple crayon and the blue crayon is a blue crayon and ... right? But we can't keep assigning value and worth or lack of value and lack of worth because you happen to have a preference towards that purple crayon or that blue crayon. They can just be, and we can just be. And so, yeah, don't get me on my soapbox, Karen.
No, I loved it. It is so true that we don't want government interference, but we wait for government interference so people will do the right thing. And the reality of it is, we all know what the right thing is to do for each other. We're not stupid people. We are humans. We've had the experience. And I find it very odd in 2026 that there are still buildings, even government buildings, that are not accessible. Or maybe you can get in the front door, but once you get in the front door, you're stuck in the lobby.
Right.
There's an organization, it's actually a coffee house in upstate New York. It's called Cafe Lena. And Cafe Lena was put together in the early 60s. It's the oldest coffee house in America right now. And within the last 10 years, they did a remodel. They put in an elevator, but they were a nonprofit organization. They still are. They didn't have the money to do that. And so their stage was on the second floor. And the stairs to get up there were rickety old steps. That's how old the building was. Right. And they were sad for many years that we're leaving people on the street who can't come and hear the music. And so they did take the music out onto the streets, but most nights it was upstairs. They finally have an elevator. They have a much better stairway that most people can navigate. But like I said, this was way after that bill was signed. Now, they didn't have to because they weren't considered a public place, but they wanted to.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big thing. We have to look around our communities, see who needs the help, see what we can do as individuals. It is just so important to become a true community. Yeah. And I wish there were more organizations like yours, or at least more that the public knew about, because that's the problem.
Yeah, we're all in silos.
We're a little bit ignorant right now. Yeah. So I know you're in Minnesota. Do you help outside the state of Minnesota? Do you connect with other groups outside the state?
Yeah, that's our hope. We have worked with some other organizations or individuals and, throughout the United States. And then I have done different podcasts in Africa and in Great Britain and over in Asia as well. And so really it's just spreading that awareness and then figuring out how we can do this thing called life together. But then I also love, as we expand into that, I also want to encourage people to get to know the disability community and culture within their spaces, right? Because you can't just work with Jenna, or you can't just work with Above and Beyond with you and be like, oh, well, that's the Midwest flavor, especially Northern Midwest, right? We kind of cover Minnesota and Wisconsin is where our board members live currently. And, but in that, it's like you can't just go and replicate because needs are different and needs are going to change. And just because you're not disabled yet doesn't mean later on today, tomorrow, a different loved one, a friend isn't going to come into your life. And you're like, but I want you to experience this amazing pasta at XYZ restaurant. Or I want you to feel comfortable coming and staying for 4 hours at my house. But, oh, you can't get to my bathroom? Right? Like, there's just so many other aspects of humanity that we have to look at as a community. And it's a shame that currently with the ADA being the largest unfunded mandate the American government has ever put forth, is like everybody is always looking for money, right? Like always like, how do we fill these gaps? How do we make these mom and pop places that they want to become accessible? They want to be committed to the spirit of the ADA. They don't want just a checklist so they can put a sticker on their nose and say, well, look at us. We're we're all that in a bucket of fish, as I love to say. And a host a few weeks ago was like, oh, you are from Minnesota with that saying. So I'm like, I think it's more from my music days of all that in a bucket of fish, because that's like the whole sound of a drum set when they put them boom ching. So, but anywho, and so it's just sad that the system is set up like the only way you can make change is to sue through the Department of Justice. Like, that is wrong, because how many of us have the extra spoons to do that? And yes, the disability community has a huge buying power, right? Like I just looked up at new stats and it's like $50.2 billion a year is spent by the disability community for leisure travel alone. And that's not including us paying for our PCAs to go with or extra hotel rooms or all that extra stuff. And so there's so many misnomers of like, well, you're at poverty. Yeah, there's a good portion of my community in which are that I've experienced also in my journey, right? And that's not the whole picture, right? Because for any people group, that's not the whole picture. And, we are the most diverse, the largest, probably, minority in the world, because anybody can join us at any time. And so let's get to know each other. Let's flip the scripts. Let's show the world what that looks like, instead of always being, that people group that people have to do for. Or most of my journey was people were doing to, but very few were doing with. And so that's what I want to flip, right? Like, great, you have kind intentions. You can have the best of intentions, but you can still be discriminatory. You can still be adding barriers. You can still be doing unsafe things for us, right? When people come up and say, oh, can I push you? And they don't wait for the answer for me to say no, or I do say no and they still grab my chair, and it's like, oh, you can break my right arm because my right elbow's fused. Like, don't do that. I'm not going to walk up to you and be like, here, Karen, let me help you. And grab your arm to pull you along faster, right? But like, why do we do that to others? But, I have to put that weird scenario in people's heads or that visual. And then they're like, yeah, no.
You know, I, so much of what you're saying comes with good intention, and yet we don't ask the right questions because we're afraid to.
Yeah.
I broke my shoulder a year ago last Christmas, and I was in a binder for 3 weeks after my surgery. As soon as I got out of the binder, I was told, use your arm the best you can. Well, people didn't know. They didn't know me. They didn't know that it was still healing. Yeah. And I cannot tell you how many times I would go into a group and somebody would just grab my arm. And of course, it was always the right arm that was healing. Yeah. And I had to stop and almost yell no, don't touch my arm. It's healing. And I thought, this is sad that I have to wear a sign.
Yeah.
But we're trying to help each other, but communication is the most important. And you can say hi to somebody without touching them and communicating whether or not the touch is okay. But it's all about education. Yeah. And so many of us want to walk around with blinders on, and it's like, oh, I already know that. Oh, I get it. And that, unless we've been in your chair, in your shoes, in your body, we can empathize, but we cannot understand.
Right.
How can people find you and follow you and get to know more about your organization and maybe realize that they need to create something in their own community?
Yeah, best way is through our website, aboveandbeyondwithyou.org. There you can find, all the services we provide, from consulting and training and podcasting and public speaking and just all those things. You can also find my memoir, which is within my spokes. There's a link there, and all the proceeds go to the work of Above and Beyond with You. You can also find it wherever you purchase books, or some libraries even have it. So there's that option. The audiobook will be coming out soon, because I know that's an accessibility need as well. So keep looking for that. You can also find us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and we love connecting and helping. And if you find yourself coming to Minnesota and you need some, hey, where are the hot spots of not only access, but fun and other things, we also love helping people navigate what that looks like. So love connecting.
Well, we're going to put all that information in the show notes so that there's no excuse not to find you, not to find your organization, not to learn more. And I'm hoping that we can have you on again in the future and, just reiterate this information, because sometimes that's what we need to do. We need to hear it numerous times over. My son told me something yesterday that happened at work as he's grieving the loss of his dad. Mm-hmm. He doesn't want to bring that into work, but every once in a while he does get triggered. And he went and he sat with his manager and he said, look, I'm not here to ask for sympathy. I'm not here asking for anything special. But when I get this twinge, I need to separate myself. Sometimes for a minute, sometimes for a little bit more. And she looked at him and she said, well, it's about time you admitted it. And she did it with a big smile on her face. She said, look, I've never lost a parent. I've never really grieved a death. She said, so I don't know exactly how you're feeling. She said, someday I'm sure I will, but now I don't. You need to tell me. He was so relieved. He's been bottled up for the last 8 weeks, afraid that he's going to fall apart at work. And for the first time in his voice last night, I heard, Mom, I'm going to be okay.
Nice.
And as a parent, when your child's okay, so are you.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's how you feel about your students as well. When you see that they're okay, wow, makes your job so much better.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jenna, for joining us today. Hopefully spring will come to Minnesota soon, I hope. I hope it comes to Northeast Ohio soon, too, because I am not a snowbird. So just the way it goes. But thank you. I appreciate you. And good luck with the organization. Bye-bye now.